My name is Chris Patrick. I'm a registered nurse with over 50 years of nursing experience, and I'm going to be talking about communicating with a person living with dementia. I am a dementia specialist, and I'm a dementia reality master trainer. Hopefully you'll gather some information. Just so you know, we don't give away our, we don't give out our PowerPoints, but anytime during this this program, if you feel like you need to take a picture, a snapshot of a slide, feel free to do so, as for some of you that's very helpful. All right, so before we get started, I just want to show you there's different ways to communicate.
I love you. Did you hear that?
So just different ways of communication, and we're going to talk about that when you're working with someone who's living with dementia. So the objectives of today is we're just going to talk about the basic threads of communication, how we all normally communicate, and then understand why a person who's living with dementia really has some unique communication needs. We do have some strategies that hopefully will help you. That will help your impact your interaction with people and really understand how to look for meaning in the verbal and nonverbal communication of people living with dementia. So what is communication? It really is the process by which information is exchanged between individuals through a common system of symbols, signs, or behaviors. And here's another example of a different way to communicate. There we go. Another way to communicate. But let's talk about how we all normally communicate. It really refers to how we communicate every day and the way we typically exchange information. It encompasses both verbal and nonverbal forms of interaction. It really includes speaking and listening, gestures, and body language, as also with facial expressions. How we communicate really sets the foundation for understanding how communication with a person living with dementia will be different from other people. And this is a different way of saying, I love you. So three different ways on how to communicate I love you. Now, we're not going to be teaching someone with dementia Morse code, and we're not going to be teaching them sign language. What we have to do is just understand how that person is communicating. But before we can do that, we really have to understand the common process of communication. And it's really an uninterrupted thread. You have two people who are sending and receiving information. So this is the person who decides that they want to send a message, and they are encoding it in their brain. We don't even think about that. But once we think, oh, I want to see Stacy wants to order pizza tonight, our brain is already communicating or encoding that message. Then we send the message out, whether it is written or it's verbal or whatever. There's always going to be a lot of noise. what we can do, because we don't have dementia, is kind of ignore that noise. Now, it can be environmental noise. It can be noise in our head. It can be noise that is, interruptions in the conversation. So there's always going to be noise. But when you don't have dementia, you can push that noise aside. So I've sent this message out to Stacy, asking her if she wants to order pizza tonight for dinner. As soon as she sends that out to John, who's receiving that, John is decoding that in his brain. What did she say to me? What, she wants pizza tonight? So there's a whole process. And again, we're not even aware that this process is going on. Once that is decoded, he encodes his message and sends it back to Stacy and says, yeah, I'll have pizza tonight, but do you like sausage on your pizza? And this conversation goes until they've made a decision. That's the normal communication process. Communication between two cognitively intact people is a shared responsibility. Both of us, both John and Stacy, take part in that 100%. However, when we're communicating with someone who's living with dementia, that is no longer a shared responsibility. So there are some unique communication needs of a person living with dementia. People living with dementia, we require a lot of patience and a lot of understanding due to those cognitive impairments. We have to keep in mind that when someone has dementia, and it depends on what kind of dementia they have, whether it's Lewy body, it's frontal temporal, it is Alzheimer's disease. Depending on what part of the brain is diseased, we're probably going to lose some communication. In some dementias, it comes early in the dementia, and in other dementias, it comes a little later in the dementia. So we know we have to adapt those needs to the individual's capabilities and preferences. What's really important is when we're talking with someone who's living with dementia, we have to practice clarity and simplicity. That is really crucial to communicating. So in other words, if, I ask, if I need Kathy to go up the stairs with me and put her coat on and put her hat on, if I say, Kathy, you need to go upstairs and put your hat and coat on, that's not clear and that's not simple enough for communication with someone living with dementia. And we'll talk about that in a minute, how we can simplify this. And again, it's going to take patience. Emotional content, we know, often takes precedence over the factual content in the conversation with a person. So really, what we look like, what our body language is, what our facial expression is, the tone of our voice, the cadence of our voice, that's all going to be picked up by someone living with dementia. They don't lose that. They can feel your anger. They can feel your impatience. They can feel your need to speed them up, and they're going to act off that. And sometimes that supersedes the message that you might be sending. Now, just to review what dementia is, it's really a group of symptoms that are caused by several disorders that affect the brain. And people with dementia really have an impaired cognitive functioning. Sorry about that, I'm just letting someone in. And they lose their ability to do a couple things. They have an inability to problem solve appropriately. Sometimes they will lose their ability to maintain their emotional control. That's quite common. You'll see some personality changes. I've had people tell me, my mother spent a year in the convent before she met my father and got married. She's a very religious person, and she's swearing like a sailor right now. So you will see, because the filters in the brain are gone. Things that someone would normally filter out are gone. That's why they say and do inappropriate things, which causes behavioral problems. We call them behavioral problems. While memory loss is a common symptom, it alone does not mean that the person has dementia, because people can have memory loss for a lot of different reasons. So in order to be diagnosed with dementia, they have to have 2 or more deficits in brain function, such as memory loss, such as changes, declining language skills, decline in the sensory skills, seeing, hearing, touching, feeling, smelling, tasting. And all of this, all these losses have to be there without a loss of consciousness. So we know that dementia is chronic and persistent, and it has no known cure. Now we're getting close. We're getting close to figuring out how to stop it, how to cure it. Right now, we only know how to slow it down. But in the end, it is a disease that will take your life. Now, I will tell you, oftentimes you'll see on a death certificate of someone with dementia, dementia is not a cause of death. They usually die of secondary causes, such as massive infections, skin breakdowns, pneumonia, urinary tract infections. And so you'll see that first, and then dementia is kind of on that list. But we know it's caused by damage to the brain. It depends, again, what type of dementia that you have. But like, let's say with Alzheimer's, the changes that you see are what are called plaques and tangles. And it's really stuff that occurs or sticks to the neurons in the brain. And our neurons is what keeps us going, thinking, moving, eating, breathing. We need our neurons. We've got billions of them, but we need those to move forward in life. Like I said, the type of dementia and symptoms depends on which region of the brain is damaged. I know tonight there's a special on with Diane Sawyer, and they're going to be talking to, and I don't know her name. I know the name of his, Bruce Willis's first wife, but they're going to be talking to his wife on his journey in frontal temporal dementia. And so, or FTD. So if you can tune in tonight and watch that, it'll kind of give you an explanation of what FTD is. And that and vascular disease are probably kind of hand in hand with Lewy body being the after Alzheimer's disease, or the ones that you see most common. What we do know about dementia, it's not a normal part of aging. Yes, there are things that we do when we age. I notice that sometimes I have to stop and think of a word. I have to stop and think of things I'm, you know, I don't find it easy to multitask anymore. Those are normal things. That's a normal part of aging. But we know that the changes that you have in dementia are going to be different and chronic. Some symptoms of dementia are caused by treatable conditions. So, you know, sometimes you'll see an older adult who may be confused, they may be delirious, they may be hallucinating, and it's because they may have a urinary tract infection, or they may have an infection in their bloodstream, or they may have pneumonia, or they may have a metabolic disorder, or they're dehydrated. There are things that can get you confused as an older adult, hallucinate, be delusional. But once we fix those things, you should go back to your normal baseline of how you were before. So what we need to communicate is memory. And there's a big interplay of memory and communication in dementia. But we have to keep in mind that memory loss is a diagnostic symptom for many of the dementias. So keep that in mind. We know that there's diverse brain regions involved, and we need to know that there is also brain deterioration. And because of that, there may be some memory challenges. This is just an example of a cerebral cortex comparison. So we're looking at a normal brain related versus a dementia related brain. And you can see that the brain looks kind of puffy and squishy, and it shouldn't be hard and rigid like this. And you can also see that in this one, the ventricles are small and they're nice and tight. You can see in this one, the ventricles are very large. You can also see that the hippocampus, which is right here, you can see that there's quite a loss of that hippocampus. This is where we create and we store most of our memories. It does other things too, but the hippocampus is very important for storing and creating memories. Now, this has nothing to do with dementia, but I always like to talk about this when I have some older adults with me. If you can look at this brain, imagine your skull right up against this. Okay, so right up against this skull or this cerebral cortex is your skull. If you look at this one, there's a lot of space. I'm going to tell you there's going to be space between the skull and the cerebral cortex. If you fall as a younger person, if you fall and hit your head and you have a brain bleed because of that head trauma, within hours, you're going to have symptoms because it's going to cause a lot of pressure in your brain because there's no place for that blood to go. So it's going to push down on your brain. As an older adult, just with aging, we're going to lose a little bit of our brain tissue. That's normal. The normal brain is about 2 to 3 pounds. We're going to lose about a half a pound with aging, and we're going to lose about a pound to a pound and a half with dementia. So going back to this brain of you and I as older adults, there's a lot of space here. If you fell and it caused a brain bleed, you can see that it's going to take a very long time to cause any symptoms, which is pressure on the brain, which will cause you to be nausea, vomit, delirious, confused, loss of consciousness. By that time, it's too late to do anything. So whether you think you hit your head and you're okay, and you're not sure, you need to go to the emergency room and they need to do a CAT scan on you, because that could save you a lot of problems and that could save you from death. So anytime you hit your head, I had a friend who was up on a step ladder changing a light bulb in his bathroom, and he fell off the step ladder, 65, fell off the step ladder, and he broke his wrist. He was very concerned about this broken wrist. They asked him at the hospital, like a good ER should, did you hit your head? He goes, yeah, I bumped it on the sink, no big deal. Well, they did a CAT scan and he ended up in ICU. He had a brain bleed and they were able to fix it, and he was discharged in a few days. So that's my little preaching on hitting your head. Make sure you always have that evaluated. All right, going back to the impact of dementia on the brain. Like I said, there's all these neurons in your brain, and those are neural pathways and brain tissue that is where your memory and your language is centered. But when you have dementia, you're going to find difficulty in the processing of that information, forming coherent thoughts, and it will cause an impairment on your ability to communicate. So how does dementia affect communication? We see a deterioration of language skills and fluency. We also see a loss of their ability to initiate or sustain conversations. We also will see the difficulty in understanding and processing information. And we also will see impaired an interpretation of verbal and nonverbal cues. Now, there's something called social communication, and we all do it. And that's the hello, how are you doing today? And I answer, fine, how are you? Or, was the food good or bad? It was good. So we have some social conversations that we hang on to really about until that middle to the late stage of dementia. And that's why you'll hear people say, Well, I visited your mom today and she seems perfectly fine to me. I asked her how she was and she said fine. Well, yes, that's social conversation. But if you asked her who the president was today, maybe she'd know, maybe she wouldn't know. If you asked her where she left her purse, she may know, but she may not know. So there's, sometimes when we have someone in the early stages of dementia, there's a thread of that social communication that is still working, where other people other than family members, where they see more deficits, will think that, oh, you're overthinking this, they don't have dementia. So you're always, as family, you're always going to go with your gut. So because of the changes in the executive function of someone with dementia, we're going to see a change in a couple of things that are listed here. The first one is maintaining attention. There's different types of attention. There's divided attention. I remember when my dad was younger that he could listen to the football game, watch the hockey game on TV, and read the newspaper and tell you what baseball was going on in baseball. So we don't have that anymore when we have dementia. They may forget right in the middle of a conversation what they were saying, or they'll even get off track of what you were talking about and start a different conversation. They're easily distracted, and you may find it difficult for them to complete tasks. And we'll talk about how you change your approach in wanting them to do something. Difficulty answering questions. If you ask them a yes or no question, they should be able to answer that, but we will never know if that's appropriate. There was a lady that I worked with once, and I would ask her every day after she got up from lunch, not every day, but because that would be not the right thing to do, but I would ask her when I knew she had lunch, that she would come out in the hallway and sit, and I would say to her, "Did you have lunch today?" She goes, "No, I don't think I ate yet," when I saw her leaving the dining room. So again, there might be difficulty answering questions. Also, they may be overwhelmed by too many choices. What we want to do is keep them autonomous and independent as long as they can. But you may see that they're overwhelmed by too many choices. So when you're working with someone with dementia, you want to give them 1, 2, or 3 choices. Kind of depends on where they are in their dementia. And then you might find if you ask them too many questions too quickly, they're going to get very frustrated with that. You'll also find that there's challenges in orientation. So in where they are in the room, recognizing what goes in what. Think of a child, and I'm not comparing a person, an older adult, with a child, but think of a toy that your grandchildren or your children, where they take the rectangle and they put it in the rectangle slot, and they take the octagon and they put it in the octagon slot, and so on. As adults with dementia, they will lose their spatial recognition and with objects. So that's an example of that. They might not recognize something at all, and they may be very confused about time. So some of the visual spatial challenges for a person living with dementia, we have depth perception issues. That's why older adults with dementia, now when you tell older people with dementia that they can't drive anymore, they may tell you, yes, I can still drive. Well, they still have the motor memory to drive. They know how to turn the car on. They know how to put the foot on the gas. What they might not be able to do is perceive where they are on the street. They will have different difficulty with problem solving. They again have recognition problems with objects. Difficulty with spatial relationships, like Is that car far enough away that I can make a left turn? And navigating difficulties. I see people in a community setting who walk with their walker forward, and they walk all the way into someone else who's walking with a walker. They can't judge that they need to go to one side or another of that. They may have misinterpretation of patterns. There are some dementias, and in later stage of dementias, you will have problems with facial recognition. And some people have mirror confusion. They'll look in the mirror and they'll see that person, and they'll see that person as someone that looks familiar to them, but not them. Reading and writing challenges are an issue, and impaired visual spatial memory. So dementia does affect communication, but keep in mind the main goal of communication with a person living with dementia is we want to exchange information for them. We want to make sure that they're successful in getting that information. We may just want to share a moment, just have a chit chat with them. We want them to be able to succeed. And sometimes that can be difficult the farther along in the dementia that they get, but there are times that we can make them feel successful in what they're doing. And they also we can help maintain their dignity. So if we break it down into different stages, early stage communication changes that's when they're starting to have word finding, or using words with less meaning, like that thingamajig, that whatchamacallit. My mom used to take her finger, she had Alzheimer's, and kind of point it in the air to the object and go, that thingy over there. Difficulty with abstract thought. So they can no longer, do complex conversations. You can sit down with them and talk about helping them with their bills, because they will need that, because math's an abstract thought. But you may sit with them so they become part of this, but really to participate is going to be very difficult. Talking on the phone is a very difficult thing for people with dementia to do. I had a brother that lived out of state, and he would call. He just didn't understand dementia. He didn't want to learn anything about it, but he felt that we were keeping her away from the phone. I would say call at a certain time, because she wasn't picking up her phone. She has a hearing problem too. So I would be there. I would pick up the phone. I would hand it to my mom. And after about 30 seconds, she'd hand the phone back to me. To hear a voice come through something that's put to your ear becomes foreign to them. Someone said, well, what about FaceTime? I think FaceTime makes it worse, because now they're looking at this human being in a phone, which they may have no recognition of. You'll see them repeating words, repeating questions. What time is the doctor's appointment? What time is the doctor's appointment? And they may digress. They don't understand the problems. There's an issue with safety awareness. So, they may get up and walk across the room without their walker. So they do have those poor awareness of some of their difficulties. And then when we move into middle stage, that's when they start avoiding social situations, because they know there's something wrong. So they'll sit there quietly. If you go up and ask them and talk to them, they may respond to you, but they're not going to initiate a conversation, because they can't pull those threads. Remember, when we're talking about communication, that encoding in their brain, all those neurons in your brain that do that, they may be diseased. They substitute or use wrong words. They have difficulty with comprehension, and they have trouble with repetition. So again, repeating and repeating. And then end stage, we're looking at confusion with long-term memory. So people in the early and the middle stage will have pretty good long-term memory and a very poor short-term memory. But as they get farther along in the disease, they lose both. They lose long-term and short-term. So again, they're going to continue misidentifying objects. Because they can't communicate verbally anymore, we're going to see an increase in behaviors. And this is where we'll talk about where we come in. limited vocabulary. They may use one word phrase. And again, their comprehension is decreasing. You're going to see more vocalization. They'll make funny sounds or they'll repeat the same thing. There was a lady in the nursing home when my father-in-law who had a stroke. He lived with us for 2 years and then was difficult and need 24-hour care. So we had to place him. And there was a lady there who sat at his dinner table that said, I can't get up, I can't get up, I can't get up. And she repeated this all through dinner. And there were repetition of movements that she did. She would take her food and put everything, she created piles on her plate. So you're going to see some changes in behavior too. So what's our strategies for some effective communication with a person living with dementia? Simplify and clarify your messages to the essential points. John, I want you to brush your teeth now. Now, let me tell you, keep this in mind. For every stage of dementia, we add another component of assistance. So if they're in early stage dementia, if I say, John, I want you to brush your teeth, if you know he still can do that by himself, put the toothpaste, and you always want them to do as much as they can for themselves. It gives them a feeling of independence and autonomy. John, put the toothpaste on your brush. May not be perfect, who cares? John, put the toothpaste or the toothbrush into your mouth. Now brush up and down. Those are called verbal cues. When they can't do the verbal cues anymore, they're not following those, you're going to do the visual cues. And that is, John, I want you to pick up your toothbrush. And as you're saying that, you're pretending like you're picking up a toothbrush. John, okay, good, John. Now I want you to brush your teeth. And then you're going to act like you're brushing your teeth. And they should follow those movements. If they can't do that anymore, then we assist them. Then we do what's called hands-on assist. So it's always verbal first. And when they can't do the verbal anymore, then we do visual cueing, and then we do hands-on. Okay, next one, use nonverbal cues and gestures to support your message. We talked about that. Be patient and give that person plenty of time to proceed and respond. When you're talking to someone with dementia, do not expect an immediate answer. There's a part of our brain called the corpus callosum. It's in the center of our brain, and it transmits messages from one side of the brain to the other side of the brain, back and forth. Well, that also gets diseased. And so those messages kind of have to go all the way around the head, so to speak. Just kind of imagine that visual. It's not exactly like that. So it's going to take more time. In early dementia, 10 seconds. Count it in your brain. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And if they don't have an answer, ask the question again. Sometimes you can rephrase it, but I'd ask the same question in the same way at least twice, so you don't confuse them. The farther they get into dementia, we're waiting 15 seconds. It's going to seem like a long time, but that's what it takes for them to process what our message is. Avoid arguing or correcting their statements. You never argue with a person living with dementia, because what they see, what they hear, what is their reality. If I told you today it was pouring rain out, and in reality it's a cool, crisp, nice day, you're going to argue with me and you're going to say, no, it's not, because that your reality is that it is sunny and bright out. But with a person living with dementia, whatever they see or hear is their reality. So you validate those feelings. If they see a little, like with Parkinson's, there's a lot of hallucinations. And usually of their small children or small dogs or small animals for whatever reason. So if someone says to you, there's this cute little Scotty dog that's sitting next to me, and I don't know where he came from. I don't want him here. Instead of saying, John, there's no dog sitting next to you, you go, oh my gosh, John, look at that, a Scotty right next to you. Let me move that away from you. I know you don't want that by you. And then you redirect them. Hey, John, you want to go get a cup of coffee with me? Or, hey, John, I'm going to go outside and garden. Would you like to sit outside with me? And redirect them to do something different, because they actually see that dog. And when you say you don't see that, whatever they're seeing, you're going to get an argument. And that's another way to start behaviors. You want to engage in active listening and show genuine interest in what they're trying to communicate. So you need to make eye contact with them. A typical is an arm's length in early dementia. As the dementia progresses, you want to get a little bit closer so you can make eye contact. There's two things you want them to be able to do. You want them to be able to see you, and you want them to be able to hear you. So if you're far away and they have a hearing loss, they're not wearing their hearing aids, or they're they have visual problems and now they have dementia, you need to get a little bit closer. You don't want to get exactly in front of them. Go off to the side about 20 degrees. Getting in front of them will be very confrontational. Standing up, talking to them will be very confrontational. So you want to lower yourself to the lower position that they're in. If they're sitting on a chair, sit on a chair next to them and talk to them. We always want to respect their dignity and their autonomy through anything that we do with a person living with dementia, especially communication. So we talked about establishing their connection through eye contact. We talked about our body position, and this is what we call the positive approach to care. We have to know that there's impact of our interactions on a person living with dementia. If we're trying to get through to them, that positive impact is always going to be empathetic and patient. You want to use visual aids when you need to use them, but make sure that they're neutral, they're pictures, they're easy to understand. And you want to make sure that you are using body language that is not negative. So neutral face, smiling face, hand positions. If your arms are crossed in front of you, that's a negative sign. The cadence of your voice, like I said, talking too fast, talking too high, or talking to them like they're an infant. So here's some of our do's and don'ts. Use simple and clear language for communication, and be patient and provide ample time, that 10 to 15 seconds for responses. Pay attention to nonverbal cues and respond with empathy. We don't want to use complex language or long sentences that can confuse them. And we certainly do not want to rush them. And don't interrupt them. Give them enough time to try to explain what they need to know or what they're doing. So challenges in understanding. They may have difficulty understanding complex language or instructions. So again, using those simple terms and giving them time, that role of repetition, giving them key information. What I tell people is in early dementia, if they're going to a birthday party or they're going to they have a doctor's appointment, I probably wouldn't tell them till the day before. And if you don't live with them, I would leave a note that says, tomorrow, August 27th, is your 4 o'clock doctor appointment. I will be by to pick you up. And, you can redirect them back to that if they're still able to interpret words. That's not everybody will be able to do that. But you want to make sure that you're not telling them 2 weeks before, because you're going to get lots of phone calls if they even remember. And again, look at nonverbal. I've talked about our body language, but look at their body language. If someone has to go to the bathroom, what do little children, again, and I'm not comparing adults to children, but what do little children do? Or what do we do as adults if we have to go? We start moving around to kind of block that, that nerve from sending us that message that we have to go to the bathroom. So if they start bouncing, if they're holding their hands between their legs, if they're pacing, when was the last time they went to the bathroom? Look at last time they ate. If they're starting to get irritable, people who don't have dementia, and I'm one of them, I get very hangry. My blood sugar drops after a couple hours of not eating something. And I can get kind of irritable if I go longer than that. So if they're starting to get irritable, when was the last time they ate? Something high protein will keep them longer, satiated longer than something that's filled with carbs. So look at that nonverbal. Also, if they're lonely, if they're sad, look at their facial expression and engage with them. Offer them something to drink. Sit down for 2 seconds, 2 minutes, and talk with them. If they are starting to get anxious, they're wringing their hands, they're tapping their feet, they're hitting the sides of their legs, they're hitting the table. Those are all signs of anxiety. That grimace on their face, they're looking angry. Signs of anxiety. We need to tell them, ask them what they're anxious about. They may not know, but what you do is you reassure them, I'm here to help you. I will help you figure this out for you. You're not alone. So they can calm down a little bit. Maybe when they calm down, they'll be able to figure out what is wrong with them. And so those are some of the challenging things with verbal communication. So we talked a lot about this already. This is types of nonverbal communication is body language, facial expressions, gestures, and they play a crucial role in nonverbal. I will tell you that people with dementia, when they have lost their words, are pretty keen on your nonverbal communication, your body language. So if you're upset and angry, they're going to get upset and angry. We talked about the nonverbal cues, and they convey emotions and feelings and moods and are vital for understanding those states of mind. So again, watching them, if they're crying, if they're smiling. The one cue I wanted to give you is something that we learned in nursing school, and that's called guarding. And that is a sign of pain. When you have a toothache, what do? You put your hand on your cheek. If you have a bellyache or you have stomach cramps, you put your hand on your tummy. If your knee hurts, you put your hand on your knee and you rub your knee. That's called body guarding. And that's a very normal thing that people do when they're in pain. And they may not be able to tell you they're in pain, but look for that guarding, because that might focus on what's going on. So again, we always want to maintain that eye contact. Use a gentle touch. Shoulders, if you don't know that person, you may ask, can I touch you on the shoulder? A calm and reassuring voice and postures and non-communication. This is Tipa Snow, and I'm kind of wondering if she's going to be on the thing for Bruce Willis tonight. I had heard, and I don't know where I heard this, so could not be true, but she's a real guru of dementia care. And I had heard that she was helping Bruce Willis's family with this. Whether she is or not, I will tell you, she's a wonderful practitioner. She has lots and lots of videos. If you just tune into Tipa Snow on videos, you'll see a lot of things on videos. And I'm going to show you this. I'm not going to show you the whole thing because it goes into bathing and these are professionals, but this is what that positive approach I'm talking about.
I'm going to get on the, are you right-handed?
Yes.
I need to be on the dominant side of the individual because that's where they have motor memory for doing all kinds of tasks. They don't know how to use their other hand nearly as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get on this side. Now, hold hands like you normally hold hands. Shake hands like you normally shake hands. Go ahead and shake somebody's hand. And realize there's nothing real comfortable about that. I mean, once you shake hands, then it's like, okay, let go. And what we can end up with is a tug of war. Or late in the disease, people with dementia often like a lot of contact, and they'll squeeze you and actually hurt you, and it's like, ow, 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 ow. And where are you going to grab to get them loose? On the wrist, and what you're going to do is bruise them again. Shake hands, but then immediately slide up around so that what you're doing is holding on palm to palm, thumb to thumb, and you've got a lot of palm contact. Try that with your partner. And then turn it so their hand is on top of yours, and just relax the hand so that it's very clear it's relaxed. What you're doing is you're putting pressure in the palm, and pressure in a human being's palm calms them down. So what you're actually doing is helping to calm them, even while we're doing things, because I'm giving them input into the sensory system. Okay? The other thing that I can do is take the other hand and lay it on top of the hand. And what I'm creating is artificial warmth and padding. What are they missing? Warmth and padding. So all of a sudden we're feeling more comfortable. Now there's a big difference between me being down here where she can see me, because remember the visual field problems? What happens if I'm up here?
I know. I just see the.
Yeah, and what if I face her like this? What she's going to start to do is mess with me here, or she doesn't realize what I'm doing, and it feels to her like I'm bossing her around. So I want to either sit down or get down so I'm at her level and she can really look at me. The other thing I can do, by applying just a little bit of pressure, she'll automatically look, and now I can talk to her. I'm going to help you get washed up.
Okay.
Okay? Good. Listen, let's take your shirt off.
So there's that visual.
There you go. Now, that's a little less distressing because she understood what I was doing by being to the side and having a single person in the room.
So you can see the position that she's in, and you saw the verbal cues. So we'll move on.
And
that helps you. I think what we need to look at is one of the important things of communication is really being empathetic. It's really essential for the understanding and emotions that we feel that the person living with dementia feels with. There's 4 elements of empathy. It's really how the person sees the world. It's no judgment, so appreciating people as human beings. It's understanding other people's feelings and then communicating that understanding. It really, empathy forms that base for very meaningful interactions and relationships with a person living with dementia. Now, I know for the caregivers out there, day after day of empathy is difficult because you get tired, you get frustrated. So while empathy is important in communication, self-care as a caregiver, I'm throwing that in, even though we're not talking about caregiving today. You can't have empathy, you can't feel rested, you can't do your role as a caregiver if you don't take care of yourself. So really, patience. I can't really enforce that enough. And we have to be patient with these people. We know now that it takes longer for them to process information, and that rushing, that is just going to cause them frustration. And that frustration we see in anxiety and behaviors. It also, patience will allow both of the people, the caretaker and the caregiver, have to more a relaxed interaction. So what is active listening? It really involves really concentrating and understanding and responding what is being said. And that's really crucial in working with a person living with dementia when we're communicating with it. It really demonstrates the empathy. So that's really where it begins. And then we look at it as a help for us to understand the message, which we may not see in words, but we might see it in the physical way that their body is responding, or what we call those nonverbal cues. That is what's going to build that trust for that person to have in us, who's living with dementia. So a 1, 2, 3, keep it simple, use clear, uncomplicated language and instructions. Be a good listener, give the person time to process and respond, and show respect and empathy. Recognize that there are emotional cues that may be expressed through changes in their facial expression, their body language, and their tone of voice. It's important for us to interpret those cues in the content of the individual's condition and their personal history. You know, keep in mind that when we have dementia, our personhood, who we are, doesn't go away. So, you know, if we know who that person is, we know what they like, we know what they don't like, that'll help us communicate as well. But we always need to respond with empathy and reassurance for them to really feel what we're trying to do for them. Here's some benefits for visual aids. My uncle, I'm his power of attorney, and he just went into an independent living. And because he was really isolating at home and he wasn't able to do his bills anymore and so on. Many of you know how that goes. And so the first week that he was there, because using a walker is fairly new to him, I put on the back of his door so he could see it when he was leaving, "Bill, don't forget your walker and your keys." So it's okay to use visual aids. I put the daily menu on the refrigerator so he can see what is being served. I didn't put the specials, I just put what they have a menu that they serve daily if you don't like any of the specials. So I put the dailies on there. I put the 4-digit code that he can put into his phone if he wants to eat in his room and he wants his food delivered. So, you know, visual aids until someone gets used to that routine, or maybe it's just because of their memory loss, but they do help. So to kind of conclude, we need to think about being present for our friends and family who are living with dementia. And what does that mean? It really means being fully engaged, minimizing the distractions, using positive body language that we talked about, using that active listening, validation and affirmation. Everybody wants that validation that they're doing the right thing. That doesn't stop when we're adults, and it doesn't stop when we have dementia. We have to always remember to respect the person and their space, be patient and flexible, and really be in the moment with them. In other words, what they see, what they hear, is yours to validate for them, and have moments of laughter, have moments of hand holding, have moments of short communication with them. And communication, when my mom had Alzheimer's disease and when she could no longer talk, music, she loved music. And I knew what kind of music she loved. Maybe if you've been with me before, you've heard this, but favorite song was Sentimental Journey, just to sing that at home. And I found it on my iPhone, in YouTube. And when she stopped talking, I would sit there and play this, and she knew almost every word. She was nonverbal, but she could sing that song. So music is a great communicating connector. So I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Hopefully you've picked up a few hints